for doing this, Darren. This is so cool.
This is great. I've always wanted to do this. I never really get to talk to like another guy on an instrument.
What do you say we get into one? Let's
do it.
Why don't you show me a little how these tunes go?
So the first song, I'm going to lean down a little bit so we can see. I'm sorry if the lighting is crappy. I think people can use their imagination with what my face really looks like. What's great about writing for narrative is that you have parameters. You kind of get to paint by numbers. And it's why I've written more songs in this past year than I have my entire career, simply because, again, writing for narrative has a vehicle behind it. If you're writing for yourself and you're putting your soul on the chopping block, it's a very different thing. And I admire so many people that people like Rufus Wainwright, that really make themselves and their lives vulnerable. Because I don't have that. What's nice about writing a show like Royalties is you go, okay, we have all these episodes. Here is the joke for each episode. Here is the kind of character we might want to have doing that song. So that kind of lends itself to what kind of genre you might want to have. And then, and this is all before, none of these people were cast. So we don't know how it's going to be sung at all. You just know that at least I did. I was very specific about curating different genres for each thing. I know you haven't seen the entire show, but I didn't want any song to be similar to the other. So I kind of had this, the checklist of there has to be like a classic piano ballad. There has to be like a hard, legitimate, like hip hop song. I want like, if it's going to be a pop song, it has to be on this side of pop, or if it's going to be anything remotely reggaeton, it has to be over here. So what's fun about that is, given each joke kind of lended itself to the kind of genre. Mm-hmm. So the first song was a song where our heroes basically write a love song that is inspired by just being really hungry and basically being in love with a hot dog. Mm-hmm. And using all that imagery and words that would describe being in love with something so much that you would move a mountain or kill a man because it is just that good. And that's the name of the song, Just That Good. One of my favorite songs ever is a Cole Porter song where he would write out phrases, and without writing the notes, he would write out how you would say it, the natural rise and fall of stuff. And so a great example of that is, it was just one of those things. Yeah. The song doesn't go, it was just one of those things. It literally goes, it was just one of those things. And it's very conversational in the rise and fall of how it goes. The example I just gave was a bad example because I didn't invert the rise and fall of the word. So, but you see what I'm saying.
One of those things.
Yeah. Cole Porter's version is better. So when I'm saying, just that good, I immediately sat down at the piano as soon as they had that line. And I went, well, because, if you're just that good, you're just like, because you're just that good. Yeah, you're just that good. So, one having a deceptive cadence to the minor 6 in order to turn back around to the affirmation of, damn, you're only just that good, you're just that good. One of my favorite tricks, which is the minor 4 over 5.
I love the minor 4. What key are you in right now?
That's E flat.
Uh-huh.
Just that. Yeah, but the 5 being the B flat in the bass, but having an A flat minor chord.
Yeah.
So you kind of had that lift. So I wanted that to be the refrain, so to speak. But the thing that I came around to that I really liked was the idea of writers trying to figure out how to play, like, what is the thing you can play with those 3 words. And I liked that there's this internal thing of, it's just that you're just that good. And having writers realize that, so that's in the episode where they figure that out. So the only way that I could have that realization happen is I kind of wanted the sort of tag of there's no real chorus, I guess. It's just a tag. And then that refrain is on the back half, sort of like, Hey Jude. I had this descending thing. It's so oh, it's just that you're just that good. again, so you have to figure out a musical way to lift the way you would say, it's just that, you're just that, you're just that good. And so figuring out a way to chordally, what's the adverb? Chordally do that. It's hard to explain. I mean, thank God you're a musician, but just that sort of descending, you know, yeah, you know, picked up a few tricks from Randy Newman / James Taylor. That was one of those magical moments. They said the song is just that good, and I immediately just said, just that good, just that good. And that became the touchstone for that whole song.
That's so wonderful. And it's so cool that you can sneak these like kind of complicated chord progressions into very catchy, very accessible pop tunes.
Well, thank you. The idea is you kind of bait and switch people with this joke, you know. That's what's so fun about musical comedy in general, is that you can slip in things that, you know, like the best example I always say, you know, the thing that really raised me is, you know, the Disney Renaissance and people like Alan Menken and Howard Ashman that, you know, what they're doing isn't like hyper sophisticated. It's accessible sophistication that sticks with you. It just cuts to the fucking like the center of your heart in ways that you can't really explain. It's a little more heady lyrically than pop music, but it's accessible for people that love pop music. But they service, you know, they still service a story and a sort of heightened way of talking. Now, I'm not saying I'm on that level because we're writing a song about a hot dog, but there are things in there that, yeah, I really like the bait and switch of like, okay, the joke is this stupid, so it's going to give us this much license to be somewhat sophisticated, just to kind of level it out, you know. And I think we do that with a lot of the other songs where, you know, even Break It In, which is a full-on hip-hop song that is sort of Mickey Mousing toxic masculinity through a sound that might otherwise be more associated with that very concept. So, and that's a broad generalization. I'm speaking in huge broad swaths there. But yeah, it's fun. Like if you have this song from a person that you think that your brain tells you is going to be like this, then you have what he's saying be the opposite of that, to sort of let the two things balance each other out. So that's something that I always like doing with everything I do. You know, if it's going to be funny, make it really poignant. Or if it's going to be poignant with a lot of gravitas, make it really funny. If it's going to be heartbreaking, you know, make it cathartic. You know, there's things that have to kind of balance each other out to justify their presence.
When did music first kind of like come into your life? I know it's been a huge part of your career since the days of like Star Kid.
Yeah, of course. I mean, music has always been sort of an integral part of my experience with life. For reasons beyond my knowledge, I can't really point to any one moment. But when I was 5, I just told my mom that I wanted to play the violin. I can't point to any example of like who was playing a violin. I just said it. And, you know, children just say a lot of stuff. And God bless my mom and God bless my parents for being like, okay, cool, let's sign you up. Like immediately. And the older I get and the more I know people with children, it's like, wow, that was like a really incredible instinct of my parents to just immediately go for it. And I owe my entire musical ability to, you know, years and years of violin training. I studied with a wonderful school in San Francisco, the Oakley Violin Studio, where I was a Suzuki student. For anybody that's ever studied Suzuki, that's kind of it's kind of like a Jedi order of a specific way of learning. Whether it's just my own inclination and ability as a musician, or if it was that specific methodology, I don't know. I think it was a healthy combination of both. But yeah, I think the violin also has such a small margin of error that it really kind of honed in a way that I don't think I was ever aware of until I was older, this sense of specificity and dynamics, and it really honed ear training. I've always been more of an aural person anyway. It's certainly been very useful in my acting career. People always ask the question, you know, what do you consider yourself, more of a musician or an actor? And I always say they're both the same thing. Music is acting, acting is music. It's cadence, it's rhythm, it's again, dynamics, crescendos, decrescendos, timing. You know, there's just like a Bach cantata, there's like a million different ways to perform that line, so to speak. And yet there are so many, you know, versions, whether it's, you know, if there's a difference between Yo-Yo Ma playing how Elliot Gould plays it. It's like, you know, there's so much variation and personality that can be imbibed into things. And so if you can't tell by the way I'm sort of thinking about it, that sort of approach to looking at anything holistically, I think came from studying the violin for so long. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have been able to jump into so many other instruments. I think people who aren't musicians are always fascinated by people who go, oh my God, he plays this, this, and this. And if you meet like a brass player or like a woodwind player, it's like he plays the trombone, the trumpet, the French horn, like all these things. You're like, wow, that's amazing. You're like, well, because they're part of the same family. So for me, as a string instrument guy, anything with my fingers, you know, piano was a natural byproduct of that. Although I never took lessons, it was always around the house. So I could kind of translate what I knew from violin to the piano. And then certainly, and most predominantly through my life, I picked up a guitar when I was like 10. And that kind of became the main instrument that I would play kind of the rest of my life. I think I play everything else like a guitar player, drums or piano. I'm thinking in terms of guitar chords. And that's why on the piano I have a lousy left hand, because I'm mainly thinking in terms of my right hand. Like it's all this. Yeah, I mean, music has always really just been the anchor. And so I never knew how I would incorporate that into my professional life. I was always in bands and I liked writing songs. And I always just, I much like a lot of artists who had to, you know, I'm not saying I'm Picasso by any means, but Picasso spent years, you know, painting the master's works. Like he would copy those works before he did his own thing. So likewise for me, I spent years, you know, learning and playing covers of all my favorite 90s alt rock songs and pop songs. That kind of became its own education in the way that I would write my own music or play with other people. But just to tie somewhat of a bow in this whole dossier on my musical background, with music, you know, again, it was always present in a fun way. Like again, playing in bands, and I always liked doing that. I would write songs, and yeah, I wanted to be a singer songwriter, but like I would just do whoever would take me. I studied acting academically at the University of Michigan, and I did music on the side, but they were never really linked. And yes, I did musical theater in high school, but certainly not in a level where I thought I would ever do it professionally. I just thought it was like cool. So here I am in the University of Michigan, which actually has a prestigious musical theater department that I was not.
I went to the University of Michigan as well.
What?
Yeah.
How do we not lead with that?
That's a fair point. It's a fair question. I buried the lead a little.
You really did. That's like the way in. We could have gotten past. Oh, wow. Okay, well, then you understand. So I was not in that department, and it's a great music school, and I took a lot of music classes there, music college, and I took violin lessons and voice lessons there. But I was not in this department. So there was kind of like church and state for the longest time. It was like I would do acting stuff, and I would play music, and it wasn't really until my senior year where my friends who had done a variety of stupid shows. I was really involved in Basement Arts, which was a student group that would just for shits and giggles, you'd put on plays and musicals for like a nominal amount of people, usually your friends, usually drunk, and always for free. Low stakes, fun places for students to just kind of cut their teeth. And I spent a lot of time there as an actor, as a director. And my buddies did like a musical every year. Like one year they did The Hobbit. They did a children's version of The Hobbit, but they changed the story to like involve the Keebler elves, and they used Celine Dion songs to score it because that was funny and nobody would ever see this. So our senior year, they did a Harry Potter one, and they asked me to write some songs for it because like, oh, you write songs. And none of the kids except for two were just theater kids that didn't do musical theater. So it was kind of this ragtag group of people that were kind of putting on the thing that they don't ordinarily do, me included, of like, okay, I guess I'm going to write. I like writing songs, but never written for like a narrative specifically before. And so once I started doing that, I really realized how much I liked it, how much the skills and proclivities I had as an actor was really helping out my instincts as a songwriter and vice versa. And so once I kind of dialed into that, I was like, this is something that is really calling to me. And then from there on out, I was like, I think I like writing songs for narrative. Every now and then I write for myself, but for narrative is really my thing.
How did the impetus of that project start?
Well, I've always had it in my head. When I started working on Glee, which, you know, I'm not going to pretend isn't a huge part of this story. Again, that kind of involved a lot of the things we were saying. My comparison is, you know, in Slumdog Millionaire, where all the questions he was asked had exactly to do with specific life experiences he had completely serendipitously. That's kind of what happened with me on Glee. I had for years been playing songs, popular songs, what I like to call the contemporary American songbook, because there's the jazz standard songbook that if you're went to music school or you're a music fan, like you got to know, you know, what a day this has been, what a rare mood I'm in. Like you got to know all the standards. I just played that song completely wrong. Sorry, different key. But there are those standards, and then there are, and I think things like Glee and American Idol really contributed this to the latter half of the 20th century, to the beginning half of the 21st century, which is the new songs that you have to know. If you don't know Don't Stop Believing, if you don't know Piano Man, if you don't know how to play, what's one? I heard there was a secret chord that David played and pleased the Lord. You know, so much so that we almost roll our eyes at that when you see somebody go up and play that at an open mic. He's there now. What's the other standard that I always say people do now? Oh, you always see young girls do, 'cause I'm a creep, I'm a widow. Like, these are the ones you got to know. So I spent so much time in bars and restaurants, both in college in Michigan on State Street, at Saba's, and at Potbelly's. I played there a lot. When I moved to Los Angeles, I played at Maggiano's twice a week, and I would play these long 4 or 5 hour sets where my whole rule was never to play the same song twice. So I'd be playing all these hits that are popular songs that I didn't write, that I just knew the chords, I just knew all of it. And then I joined the show where I sing popular hits from the New American Songbook. And I was like, I cannot think of a person who's more built for this. So that's not what you asked. But during that time, I signed with Columbia Records because they were like, oh, wow, you have records that have charted on Billboard. Of course, they was referring to Star Kid. And some of my own stuff that I had put out just as a supplementary source of income. And so they're like, oh, let's put out a record with you. And that whole slog was really interesting because I started navigating the world of songwriting, of what it is to go to writer sessions, producer sessions, and try and create something from nothing, whether it was for myself or other people. You kind of, it was an infrastructure that was so ripe for a comedic series to me, because it is this comedy of errors where you meet these relative strangers and you go, okay, how do you feel? I'm kind of mad. You know, my breakfast was cold today. My breakfast was cold this morning. And you just go, okay, like we're going with that, but let's change the words to like, my soul is sad and I'm mourning. Like you kind of piece these weird things slowly together out of nothing. And sometimes it is the Carole King musical Beautiful, where these beautiful life moments inspire these extraordinary albums that change the face of culture. But that is the minority of the time. Those are the 1 in a million. You know, Carole King is an outlier. Where most of the people who write songs for a living, there's almost a utilitarian value to it. We got to get it placed for this album if we're lucky, for this artist. Trying to get it placed for this commercial. We're trying to get this synced. I got to pay my bills. That would be a huge paycheck. You know, there are things where it's a little less sexy and more like a 9-to-5 slog. And I was always so enchanted by this separation of people who don't know music, thinking that it's this amazing romantic thing where they write the song that I'm going to play at my wedding, and like guys in a room just banging their heads against the wall, just dying to find like a rhyme that isn't that shitty. So I've always really been in love with that. And everybody in the music industry, especially in songwriting, has great war stories from artists or producers. And it just seems so ripe. And I always love these music shows, like, you know, insider shows like Empire and Nashville and Smash, which all look at the music industry in very different ways, but do it with a really big sense of melodrama.
Yeah.
And I being a goofy person, really kind of gravitated more towards the scrappier, goofier, satirical side, where we didn't take it seriously at all, but still treated it with enough knowledge and respect that, you know, it was somewhat believable. And I kind of wanted to, I always said what Reno 911 is to cops, I kind of wanted to be for music shows. I wanted to have credible, legitimate, you know, people working on it from the music front via connections I had made via those years I had with Columbia Records and working on Glee, but still doing what I think I do best with my friends from college, which is just taking the piss out of something we love. So it took years when I finally had the time to do it, but it was just always something in my head. I always wanted to make the show. I wanted to make it with the Star Kid people. And instead of acting in one thing and writing music for another thing, I wanted to do it all in one thing so I didn't have to spread myself too thin. So again, I'm really one for the long form answers, man. You got to be careful because I'll go off.
Yeah, we appreciate it. There's so many wonderful guest stars on this show. Rufus Wainwright, Lil Rel singing the Break It In tune. The one that like really captured me the most was Mark Hamill as this country legend. His performance is so like interior and so lived in and authentic. What was it like working with him and writing for him?
There's a lot of things I'd like to say about Mark Hamill that we don't have enough time to talk about. But as an actor, the thing, yes, of course, he's part of one of the biggest cultural phenomenons of all time, and owns up to that and loves that and is an American treasure for that, international treasure for God's sake. But another thing that I think people might not realize is that he's a tremendous actor. He's an actor. He was acting when he played Luke, and as he's shown through his very sort of prolific voiceover work for the past 40 some odd years, he is a vocalist in the true sense of vocal manipulation, and he's a true character actor. If people were familiar with his other work beyond Luke Skywalker, he has a litany of really amazing character-y things that has a lot to do with changing his voice and the way he talks, and he's really good at it. It's not like he was doing that to specifically break away from Luke Skywalker. It's because he just is a naturally gifted character actor and performer. Getting him to do this was a total shot in the dark, and him saying yes was a total surprise. I encouraged all of them to create their own character and be their own thing. And because it was a country song, he obviously came in with this kind of Southern drawl, like, you know, Johnny Cash meets, I don't know if Bruce Springsteen was more of like a straight up country Western guy. And he was really worried about coming into the booth and, you know, getting to vocal produce Mark Hamill is a feather in my cap that I never thought that I would ever have. He was excellent because he gets vocality and he gets the joke because he's a funny guy. So if you get those two things, that's kind of all you can really ask for. You know, I wrote the song, I think, I want to say like 6, 7 semitones higher. So we had to make it low for him, obviously, because he's got this low, gruff rumble, which serviced the character really, really great. He was really great with the accent, and he was great in the booth. And the funniest thing that I like to say is I kept trying to get him to say the word penis like 5 million times, that I kept saying, all right, Mark, I need like a harder penis. I need you to really rip into that consonant so it's really funny. And literally saying to Mark Hamill, and him and I laughing, going, I need you to give me a harder penis, Mark Hamill. Mm-hmm. And having that actually not be a joke, but an actual direction that had value to the song, is just, I mean, the joke explains itself. But for that one, Nick Lang, and Nick and Matt, who are the brothers that I wrote the show with, Nick doesn't fancy himself a songwriter, but they're comedians, and so they are naturally gifted. When we wrote the song, we kind of had this, like, how do we connect this really silly monologue about this guy finding solace in the proportional presumed size of King Kong's penis with how do I make that an empowering anthem? And so we were trying to like follow the structure of country songs. It has to be a story in which you find comfort. So we kind of thought about what his story was. You know, he got to New York City and he tried to live his big dreams and everybody laughed at him, and he had to do X, Y, and Z to feel better than everybody.
To be clear, this song is literally about the character King Kong.
Exactly. He got to New York City. He had this is detuned. He had just arrived. He was hungry. He was naked. He was barely alive. So that was like how we started the song, me and Nick just talking about it. And then Matt Rad and Chris Wallace and Joshua wrote the song with a bunch of guys just sitting around making King Kong jokes. It kind of formulated into what it was. But the idea was to make it an empowering country album. But it was all written before we knew it was going to be Mark Hamill. So luckily, you know, nowadays with technology, you can just pump things down. I'll probably release it at some point. But I did original demos in all of the songs. And if you heard him, you wouldn't ever believe that. Like if you heard, you wouldn't go, "Oh yeah, we should have Mark Hamill sing that song." It wouldn't have occurred to anybody. But I'm glad it ended up that way because they're very different.
That's such an awesome story. Why don't you take us home? Last thing we do, you want to walk me through that chorus right quick?
I mean, it's a very simple song. I mean, I listened to a lot of I forget all their names. There's a lot of country artists that I was listening to for inspiration. But just if we're in the key of D. It's just a 4-1-5-6, so that's G, D, A, B minor is the verses.
Yeah.
He got to New York City. Oh, wait, no, we're doing the chorus, right?
Yeah, whatever you want. Yeah.
So he just arrived. He was hungry. He was naked. He was barely alive. Tried to make it big in showbiz. Showed him what he had, but they all just laughed in his face. Back to the 5. So that's the verses. We'll just do the pre-chorus and we'll do the bridge really quick.
Yeah.
We have the minor 6, so E minor. And I think of my friend every A minor, every time that A7 time that I feel small. He never let his tiny penis make him forget he was the greatest of all. And the reason why I was so keen on him saying that is because up until that point of the song, it sounds like a very earnest story. So I was like, when you say that word, it has to shatter through the screen of somebody watching where they go, "Wait, what? Did Mark Hamill just say fucking penis? Are you kidding me?" So that was like the intent behind when he sung that. That was the direction. So of course, we come in on 2. 'Cause he's mighty, G, mighty, mighty, mighty is Kong, D, bo-do-do-do. Yeah, he was mighty, mighty as Kong, and A. It doesn't matter if you're hung like a mouse, to A, or an elephant trunk when you're King D. No one cares about the size of your junk. The walk down to the B minor, and then to the E minor. Now when you're mighty, walk up to the G. Yeah, mighty is Kong. Yeah. So we don't have enough time. We could go through this forever, but yeah, that was a lot of fun to write. And what can I say? I love that song. I still can't believe in every interview I talked about it that Mark Hamill sang it. It just blows my mind.
I know. Mark Hamill sang it, and you wrote it, and that big hit on that E minor is so fun and so satisfying every time.
Oh, dude. I mean, we don't have enough time to talk about this, but just the strength of in every genre, this, especially if you grew up in the 90s, it's a big one. Anything that resolves from a, what is that? The 3 to the, what is it? So we're doing, if we're in D, so, it's a 2 to the 2 walks up to the 4, excuse me. If the guitar was tuned. It's the best way to tag something. I'm careful with what I say next because I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, clearly. But apparently I got to go talk to other people. So,
hey, as could I. Darren, thank you so much for geeking out about music theory, talking about Mark Hamill's penis.
Yeah. What else is there to do? True. Like, what more could I want?
Royalties on Quibi. Everyone watch it. Thanks.
All right, please watch it, guys. Thanks. Nice. See you guys.